In 1852, a Norwegian musician tried to establish a new Norway. Apparently, he didn't get the memo that the Revolutionary War was over, and we had already established our independence. Also, speaking of Revolutionary War, every Christmas time at Washington's crossings, the crossing of the Delaware is reenacted. That is my home state of Pennsylvania. And my hometown is Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which was founded, illegally of all things, in 1751. I find it ironic because it's now famously more known for its car shows, which are held every spring and fall. And my family calls it the semi-annual return of the whoopie pie, or as the rest of the town calls it, the twice-a-year migraine. Otherwise, it's mostly a pit stop. You have a family that comes off of the interstate, they run into the Walmart to grab a drink and use the bathroom, and they go back on their merry way. And I hated it. But that was just me. My mother and I were outsiders from Virginia, and it didn't help that everyone in town was related to each other. In fact, it was already bad enough that my grandfather knew everyone and everyone else's business. But my creative imagination needed more. Unfortunately, though, nobody understood why I wanted to leave, including my mother. It had been determined that I had a set path, and there was nothing I could do to change it. But I had inherited my great-grandmother's stubbornness streak, and I ended up dropping the biggest bombshell of them all. I joined the U.S. Navy, and I became the subject of controversy in my family until the next human tragedy. But I didn't care, because if they don't want to believe me, then so be it. My name is Gabrielle Schaefer, or Gabby, as my friends call me. And I have learned not just my time in the military, but in the time I was trying to figure out who I was in high school, that I am persistent, I am inquisitive, and I am creative. As I said before, my great-grandmother had a stubbornness streak that had no stop sign. Even at the tender age of 89, she was always in the church sweeping the floor. She was always down at the firehouse playing bingo. And even on her deathbed, she was saying her prayers on her rosary. That stubbornness streak was passed on to my grandfather, who could never sit still after an injury, to my mother, who always has to win the argument, and to me, who my mother says I never listen. Has my persistence gotten me into trouble? Yes, it has. But I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that. In high school, I had applied to 10 colleges, and I only got into 2 of them, those 2 being in Hawaii. I was ecstatic that I had gotten into those colleges in Hawaii, but my mother, not so much. In fact, she somehow locked it away inside her brain that I had even gotten accepted into college. And, as mothers sometimes do, she panicked. She ended up stealing my debit card and filing out an application for another school that I had no intention of going to. And because I was still considered a minor at the time, there was nothing I could say against it. But there was something I could do about it. I ended up speaking to a Navy recruiter, and I was interested in what they could offer me. As someone who came from a family of those who served in the military previously, I knew I was going to expect the candy canes and rainbow talk. Many of my family members tried to talk me out of it, and some even suggested that I wouldn't make it. But I proved them all wrong. Because I persevered, I surpassed even those expectations of my Navy boot camp instructors. I also owe not only my persistence, but my curiosity for getting me this far. As a friend once told me, curiosity may have killed the cat, but perseverance brought it back. I don't like it when somebody tells me that it's always been that way. For example, a tree isn't always just a tree. It starts out as seed and it grows into a tree. It goes back to that stubbornness streak. I always need to know why. When I was younger, I would try to figure out how things work. I would read textbooks for fun. And I would have my grandfather show me what project he was working on, even though I didn't know what he was doing at the time. I was really excited when I became an electronic technician. My job requires me to have an extensive knowledge of how radars work and how communications equipment function. And if I can't figure that out, I need to know how to navigate a technical manual to get the right answers. I'm also a very hands-on person. In my 10th grade biology class, I was the only girl who would dare touch the frog. And I didn't flinch when it came time to dissect it. Another trait that comes with my curiosity is that by learning new things, I'm forever feeding my imagination. My imagination got its boost in 10th grade. We were studying A Midsummer's Night Dream for English class. I had experienced Shakespeare before, but it was Romeo and Juliet, and the story had been played out so many times in pop culture, the only thing I got out of it was how to do couplets. It may have been also I had a more well-rounded English teacher. But I was inspired by Will's crazy soap opera of fairies, the human love square, and this play within a play. That night, I went home, and my keyboard never stopped typing. For several weeks, I worked on what would become a rough draft that I would eventually abandon, but I had what I called my first writer's explosion. That rough draft was never finished, but I hope to go back to it someday. I mean, it's a story about fairies, dragons, and high-score LAN Halo parties. I often find my inspiration from movies. Oddly enough, the ones that don't fare too well at the box office, such as Atlantis: Lost Empire, The Lone Ranger, and Jupiter Ascending. I guess I feel that I can make these flops better by making their stories more interesting. I guess that's just a strange quirk that I have. But quirks are what make each individual different. If my hometown had been a bit quirkier, I may have stayed around. The town of Carlisle has changed a lot since I left it. The recent recession hit it pretty hard. 2 of the 3 main factories that serve as the workforce for the town have completely shut down. There are houses popping up everywhere, but there's nobody to fill them. And even before the economy tanked, Walmart completely destroyed the local businesses. And for years, the National Guard has been talking about taking over the fairgrounds that service the car shows. I guess I was just lucky enough to jump off the train before it crashed. Sometimes I think about the what ifs. What if I had stayed around and remained a cashier making only $9 an hour? Chump change compared to what I'm making now. Or if I had followed my mother's destined path and ended up dropping out of school because I would hate myself for not following my dreams. But that didn't happen. I had the perseverance to do what I wanted, the inquisitiveness to ask the right questions, and the imagination to see that anything is possible, even when everyone else doubted me. My name is Gabrielle Schieffer, and that is who I am. I would also like to cite the following sources for their information: Huffington Post, weird facts about your state, 50states.com/PA, the Commerce of Carlisle, the Cumberland County Historical Society, and Box Office Mojo.